You're now live. Yep.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to this licensing committee. I was going to say the first of this cycle, but it's not, because of course the first one was at the special full council meeting back in May. The members I've got today at the moment, of course, I'm supported by Councillor Billy Drummond, Councillor Clive Taylor, Councillor Jane Langsford, Councillor Martha Vickers, Councillor Paul Kanda, and of course Councillor Linda Sturgis. I was going to call you something else, Councillor, sorry about that. Okay. The portfolio member for licensing, Councillor Lee Dillon, I believe is in attendance on Zoom. Is that correct?
No.
He's not? Okay, fair enough. Okay. Mr. Ben Ryan to my left is in attendance. He will obviously be the clerk to the committee, and the Zoom host is behind Lizzie Reeves. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Welcome, Councillor Foote. You're in that position over there. Okay. Please, can I obviously ask everyone? Sorry, I've just been reminded that I've actually missed the officers. Sean Murphy was expected to be here, but we're not certain whether he's going to be in attendance in person or on Zoom. I'll also welcome Mrs. Amanda Ward, Mrs. Vicky Rigdon, and of course to my right, Mrs. Moira Fraser. They will obviously be officers that will be assisting and advising the meeting. I return to my comment I said a few minutes ago. Please, if you can, silence your phones, or as I normally do for point of safety, I normally put it on aircraft mode, but definitely please don't allow it to go off during the meeting. And of course, also that refers to tablets as well. In regarding the fire alarms, if we hear the evacuation alarm this afternoon, we must treat this as a real emergency and obviously leave the building. And the exit routes, of course, are quite clearly laid out, and they will be shown to us by the officers supporting the meeting. Please follow any instructions given by the train officers. And of course, the assembly point is, as we've been told in the past, the Dolphin car park. Anybody requiring help or assistance, please notify the trained officers. At that point, do the members present have any questions at all? Okay, if I could continue on. And firstly, welcome Sean Murphy. Thanks, Sean.
Apologies, Chair.
That's all right, don't worry. I'm only doing the preliminaries, so we haven't got to your section yet. Before we start the meeting, I just wanted to mention a couple points because I think it's worthy mentioning. In a previous life, I was the vice chairman of this committee, and I very much appreciated the support I was given at the time by councillors Rick Jones and also Councillor James Cole. Unfortunately, they're both not on the council now, but they were very good and very efficient and appropriate chairman, and they did an extremely amount of hard work in regarding this committee and the council itself. And of course, we've also lost the services of another long-standing member, Graham Bridgman, that was second to none in regarding knowledge on anything associated with licensing. And again, thanks must go out to ex-councillor Bridgman. Now, at the moment, we've received apologies from Councillor Paul Dick. We've just received, obviously, Councillor Foot. I gather we're also expecting Councillor Jeffrey, is that correct? But we're not certain about Councillor Carter or Councillor Stevenson. We haven't had any apologies from them at all. No, okay. Okay, right. If we can then move on to item 2, and that's obviously to move the minutes of the meeting, the licensing committee, which are held back in 23rd of January. And these obviously to be signed as a true record, but from my knowledge at the moment, it's only your good self, Councillor Vickers and Councillor Drummond were present, correct? So, okay. Councillor Drummond.
I'm quite happy to propose the minutes, Chairman.
Okay. You second. Okay. And obviously other members, if they so wish, they can agree to them if they feel appropriate. Otherwise, you'll get the opportunity to abstain if you feel it's appropriate. Okay. All those in favour? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you very much. Then moving on, we then move on obviously to the declarations of interest. And do we need to? Oh, we need to do. Sorry, we need to do the minutes of the second meeting, which was on the 25th of May, when hopefully I will have a few more interested parties. Can I have a proposal for those very short minutes of establishing the committee?
I will.
Okay, secondly. Okay, thank you very much. All those in favour? Members, any declarations of interest that you feel is appropriate that should be recorded? Okay, sorry, Councillor Langford.
I use taxis a lot. I go to pubs time to time. So I think these are declarations of interest.
Well, I think if you feel it's appropriate, yes. I would imagine probably other members are in a similar position as well. But thank you very much for your offer to have it. And you presumably want that recorded too formally?
Yes, please.
My partner holds a personal licence.
So therefore, let's move on to item 4, which is the statement of licensing policy and review of the consultation, which is going to be introduced by Moira Fraser. Moira, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Before I start, I'd like to before I introduce the item, I'd just like to pass on Julia O'Brien's apologies. Julia is the licensing manager, but she'd already booked holidays before the licensing dates were set, so she's unfortunately not able to be here. The Licensing Act 2003, which is the legislation that underpins this policy, requires the Council to prepare and publish a statement of licensing policy at least every 5 years. The Council's current policy was approved in December 2018 and must therefore be reviewed and republished by December 2023. The previous review resulted in significant changes to the policy and has meant that we have proposed relatively minor changes to this draft iteration. The main purpose of the policy is to provide clarity to applicants, responsible authorities, elected members, and other persons, including local residents, on how the Council will determine applications made under the Act. The Licensing Authority grants 4 types of licenses: premise licenses, for example, to a pub or to a restaurant; club certificates, for example, to a sports club; temporary event notices; and personal licenses. This policy deals with the three licensable activities, namely the sale and supply of alcohol, the provision of late night refreshments, which is food and hot drinks which are served after 11 p.m. and before 5 a.m. in the morning, and regulated entertainment, for example, performance of live music and indoor sporting events. You've all attended the training, and from that training, you will recall that there are 4 licensing objectives, namely the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm, and the policy must address these objectives too. The key changes to this draft policy are set out in more detail in Appendix B to the report. Most of these changes have arisen from the Section 182 guidance, which was issued in December 2022, and it's also included in the pack that all members have been provided with. The agent of change principle already exists to a degree in planning. What this means is that the person or business responsible for the change must also be responsible for managing the impact of that change. An example of this would be a developer who builds houses near an existing licensed bar that plays music. Amendments to the temporary event notices have also been made in line with legislative changes. Just to explain that a temporary event notice is a notice served on the licensing authority to hold an event attended by 499 or fewer people, including staff, where one or more of the licensable activities are taking place. The changes relate to the number of tens that can be served in respect of premises, which have been increased from 15 to 20, and they can now cover 26 days instead of the former 21. We have also updated the policy to reflect current initiatives to safeguard customers in licensed premises like the Ask Angela campaign, and to reflect changes to the scheme of delegation which were agreed by this committee in November 2021. In terms of the consultation, the legislation requires us to consult specific people, and these are set out in paragraph 4.7 of the report. We've determined that we should widen that out, and there are additional names listed of organisations in paragraph 4.8, but we'd be happy to include any additional people that this committee feels should be looked at. This will be supported obviously by a public campaign, so members of the public will be able to respond to the consultation as well. It is usual practice for consultations at West Berkshire to last for 6 weeks, but because some of this will fall over the holiday period, we are proposing that this particular consultation should run for 10 weeks from the 12th of July until the 20th of September. We will write to all the parties specifically listed and alert them to the consultation, which will be published on the Council's consultation portal on Wednesday. We will also be putting out a press release and social media posts, and have produced a poster with a QR code that we are proposing to distribute to licensed premises and also to our parish councils. My colleagues and I will be happy to answer any questions about the policy or the consultation. Thank you for listening.
Members, do you have any specific points to raise, any questions in relationship to what you just heard, or anything which you've picked up in reading the report, which I'm sure you probably have all spent and considered in the last week or so? No, I mean, well, if that's the case, are you happy with the report? Are you happy with the points which have just been raised by Moira Fraser? And you know, if you feel there's no need to raise any specific questions, I'm always pleased to. Oh, is it a question or is it putting a proposal? That's a question. Okay, Councillor Sturgis.
Thank you, Chair. When you write to the bodies, do you ask them to acknowledge receipt of the communication, whether they have comments or not?
I think that's a query that's raised quite often, because we do tend to find that the level of consultation responses is lower than we would, be comfortable with. But we can't ask, we can't compel anybody to answer. So we will write to them. We can put a note in the letter to ask them if they would like to submit a nil response, and that might help as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other points at all? I mean, if you feel you're more than happy, I'm obviously more than keen to receive a proposal on the recommendations. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Vickers. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Drummond?
I'm prepared to second it, Chairman.
Okay, and all in agreement of that? Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, Maura.
Chairman, clearly we'll come back to the November meeting with the results of that consultation, and we'll ask members to make a recommendation then to full council, for full council to adopt the report. Yeah, Chairman, would you like me to move on to the next item, the annual report?
Right, are we ready? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of the annual report we bring to this committee in July every year, and it provides a summary of the work that the committee and officers have undertaken over the past year. We also hope that as many of you are new to the committee, that it will provide a flavour of the work that you will be covering over the next 4 years. We've already covered some of this in the training sessions, which took place in May and June. Two of the most significant issues for the service over the past year have been the difficulties we have experienced in recruiting qualified licensing officers, and also falling income as a result of the reduced number of licenses being applied for. A lot of this detail is captured in the appendix to the report. We do apologise that some of the data is missing. We have implemented a new IT system, and that has proved that we have not been able to extract all of the information, especially in relation to premise licenses at the moment, but we do hope to be able to bring that information to members in due course. In terms of recruitment, we have now managed to recruit an additional 1.5 licensing officers, one of the officers working part-time, obviously, and hope that this will start to deliver an improved level of service. In addition, one of our 4 apprentices, Anne, who's in the corner, has completed a licensing qualification and has recently started to undertake some of the lower risk inspections. I'm going to ask Sean to expand on the financial position and also how we will be addressing the funding gap.
Thank you, Moira. So yeah, just to pick up on the issue that Moira has raised around, actually, if I may, I'll also pick up on the point about recruitment as well after the points about the finances. But on the finances, you can obviously see from the table at Appendix A to the report that in some areas of licensing activity, there has been a significant fall in the number of licenses held, particularly from pre-pandemic period. So you can see that, for example, in relation to, if you take line 4 there, dual, which is a dual driver. So that's a driver who can drive either a hackney carriage or a private hire vehicle. Back in 2019, there were 239 of those licensed. There are now 178. And likewise with the number of hackney carriages, so taxis, in 2019, there were 159 and they're now 118. So that shows the level of kind of decline, I think, really from the pre-pandemic period. I think I would say at this stage that we're kind of now some way the other side of the official pandemic period, and we're not seeing any significant re-emergence of licenses in those areas. So this may well be, although there will be some people that will come and go in terms of drivers, there will be vehicles that are licensed, new vehicles that are licensed, and people change vehicles. These are probably something akin to the new levels of activity that we're probably going to have in these areas for licensing activity. By and large, the rest of the number of licenses is holding up, and as Moira says, that the premise license information isn't here. But I suspect when the licensing information is circulated to the committee, the numbers, they are probably very much on a par with previous years. There is no evidence that there's been a significant kind of fall off there. Temporary event notices, as you can see, basically have significantly fallen off. So at 559 in 2019, 610 in 2020, to obviously during the pandemic, 71 in 21, but only recovered back up to 352 in 23. Now, I don't know what that's looking like this year. Maybe my colleagues in the applications team could talk a little bit more about that. But I think what I'm really trying to say is that we are now looking at a kind of long-term fall off in the number of licenses, and also with the income that the service now faces, fall off in the income that the service now has. So what we're trying to do is to kind of reshape really the licensing service to fit with the level of income we've got. It is by and large considered to be a sort of ring-fenced service where effectively the income would normally pay for the delivery of the service. We're also very conscious of the issue that obviously businesses, it's a difficult time for people, so we don't want to be necessarily looking at huge hike in fees and things like that. And we can only actually recover anyway what we actually spend on the delivery of the service. I think another area that has affected income is around some of the statutory fees that have existed. So, for example, some fees we set locally, and this committee will be part of that fee setting process in the autumn. So they would be fees like things like private for taxi and private hire vehicle drivers, operators. You will have your role in basically setting those fees. Others are set by law, and I think Vicky. Some of those fees haven't gone up for very many years now, have they? Particularly around the Licensing Act.
No, they haven't gone up. However, we have just had a consultation now that I've responded to about fees. So hopefully that will get rechanged shortly.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair, I should have gone through yourself for that. But so that's really where we are. In terms of the staffing, which actually is kind of linked to this, as Moira has said, we have had difficulty in recruiting qualified officers. I think that there are a shortage of people who are experienced and qualified officers in the licensing world. We've had some success in recruiting to the team that deal with applications. The approach that we're taking now as a service as a whole is very much to kind of grow our own staff. So we're heavily invested in training of all different types, including sort of post-entry training, but in particular around apprenticeships. Unfortunately, at the moment, there isn't an apprenticeship for licensing, and I think that's one of the challenges that the profession itself faces. The other two areas of public protection, trading standards and environmental health, there are recognised apprenticeship schemes there. And I think that is something actually we need to encourage the Institute for Licensing to take up as a council. But we are basically encouraging people through our own general apprenticeship programme to work within the licensing team. And in fact, one of our trainees, Anne, is here tonight, who's currently deployed to the licensing team. So that's kind of the way forward. It does leave us undoubtedly with some short-term challenges, though, in terms of the vacancy rates that we've got. We are in the short term I think we've got one member of agency staff in the service right now. But obviously our longer term aim is to train our own people and to fill the gap that way. So I'll say no more about that unless anybody's got any questions, which I'm very happy to answer, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Sean. I mean, I think it's a shame that we haven't got the executive member that would be overseeing this portfolio, because I think it's quite an important area to consider, and especially in relationship to what Sean's just said, in being able to deliver what we expect within this area, within the council itself. And if we're obviously short staff or it's difficult to actually recruit, we do need to look very closely at that. And I would hope that it will be an issue that the executive member looks at in future. Councillor Vickers.
Right, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just wondering, I don't know if it's our role, but the fall in the number of taxis, licensed taxis. Obviously, people became anxious during COVID about, their own health and being in a closed space. I mean, is this related to a reduction in a need? Obviously, we don't know, or just people who drove taxis deciding they went off and got other jobs and never came back to taxiing. So is there a sort of unmet need out there? Because there hasn't been a corresponding rise in public transport. So there must be, or people, hopefully they're not resorting to driving themselves when they shouldn't, when they've had a few drinks, whereas they used to get a taxi in the past. So are we getting a feel from the public that there's a shortage of taxis out there? Is that our role? I don't know.
Chair, yeah. So I the short answer is I don't know, and I don't know whether any of my colleagues know. They're nodding their heads. So, but what we're seeing here in West Berkshire, Councillor Vickers, is a very similar picture to what a lot of local authorities are seeing. So in the early days, obviously, when the nighttime economy, when hospitality was kind of closed down, when people weren't going into offices, when people weren't travelling. Obviously, there was no work or very little work basically for the taxi and private hire trade. So a number of them did go into other, some I suspect probably retired, some went into other lines of work. I guess where it is it's kind of market led, isn't it? If the demand is there, at the moment, what we're not getting is people coming to us and saying, I can't get a taxi. I'm not aware that that's happening. But what I would say is for the very reasons that you have just described, this is a hugely important service. For the community, you know, they provide it. It's not just getting people home at night after a few drinks, but it's taking children to school. It's basically running around. It's taking people who are, you know, elderly and disabled, and getting them around the district. Yeah, exactly. So it is a really important service, and I think from our point of view as a service, as a local authority, you know, we are trying to do what we can to support the service going forward. But it's, yeah, I mean, at the moment, we're certainly not getting the feedback that it's causing problems as far as I know. But I mean, hopefully it will pick up. But I think if the market is there, it should hopefully pick up and start to return to meet the demand.
I'll come bring members in a minute. I mean, just to sort of respond to Sean. Interesting enough, Sean, just for information, the Newbury Moaners WhatsApp group and the Newbury What's Happening, I think it is, has actually reported in the last week or two of having to wait a while to receive a taxi and even a disabled. So whether they're just the one-off or not, we don't know. But obviously, it's worth monitoring, isn't it, just to see that it isn't just a one-off. And you know, within reason, most punters are happy with what they're receiving. You know, being able to get a taxi when they want. You know.
Chair, it's an interesting point that you raise. If I could just respond to that point. I mean, it is maybe something where we could do some work in terms of maybe some survey of the trade as it is, maybe pick it up in any future consultation around. Particularly, actually, it would probably be a good time to pick that up. Would be a consultation around fares. When we actually do those consultations, which we do fairly regularly, where we invite the public to come back. And we could ask further additional questions about whether they found any difficulties obtaining access to the taxis. But there you are. There is then obviously some evidence on the internet that there may be difficulties on occasions.
Thanks. Right, Councillor Langford, you were first, and then Councillor Drummond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The dropping off of the licence requirement, the not being able to recruit the right number of staff, and the train your own, grow your own policy. Would you like to say something, please, Mr. Murphy, about the impact that has on the speed with which it takes for people to apply for and gain a licence? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I might, if it's okay through the Chair, could I invite my colleague Vicky Rigdon, who actually manages the application team, to just give a bit of a snapshot as to where we are in terms of processing and things, if that's okay?
Certainly, please do.
I think at current, we have a few delays based on the fact that we have an awful lot of annual leave within the team at the moment as well. But generally, most licences, if they are valid, are being processed within the 5 working days that we're allowed. So there are a few that will go past that if there are issues with the applications. But generally, I would like to say that they're all pretty much being done on time.
Councillor Drummond.
I mean, there has been turnover certainly in the licensing area. We have lost staff to other authorities, and you know, so that has been a challenge. I think overall in public protection, the turnover isn't particularly high, and I would say without knowing the exact figures, I would say it was no higher than the council as a whole, and maybe even a bit less in some areas than the council as a whole. But certainly, basically, recruitment and retention has been an issue within the licensing team. I think the applications team has been a bit more stable. So there are two sides to the licensing team. There is the team that Vicky Rigdon manages, that processes all of the applications, get the licenses out and everything else. And then there is the enforcement side of it, the licensing officers. And I think that's where we've struggled to recruit over the years. And that's where we have lost a number of officers to other authorities. And we have advertised many times and a number of times without any success at all in terms of attracting suitable applicants. So, I mean, there is an issue just overall with licensing in terms of getting officers. I think there is an issue, as I've said before, about the qualification route for licensing, but we are doing all we can basically to cover that. And I think the other important thing to say is that we're risk assessing, where we can. We are dealing with the most important things as a priority, Councillor Drummond. But obviously, where it does impact is things like on the levels of inspection work and things like this that we'd like to be doing.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vickers.
Well, just another point. I'm just seeing, there's obviously some work been going on to do with anti-idling, promoting that within taxis. But I'm wondering whether, I think you had an officer, it says in the little report, but the officer is no longer with you and you're trying to do that within house. That sounds like pretty important work, really, but it's obviously quite short term, but it isn't really a short term thing. It needs to go on, doesn't it, really? And well, maybe, can members help in any way? Is there any literature and anything we can put out there where, people see idling taxis, they can report them or report or encourage this? Because obviously it's quite a polluting habit, really.
Yes, so this has been part, Chair, if I may. So this has been part of a wider project that we've done around air quality recently. So we've always, for many, many years, monitored basically nitrous oxide in the atmosphere. Basically, in terms of assessing the air quality in the district. More recently, we've done a lot of work around particulates. Which obviously which is going to be an issue going forward. Well, it's an issue anyway, but going forward, obviously, it's going to be duty on the authority to look at particulates. So this is really where the anti-idling work comes in. It is still going on. So we have been doing a lot of work around signage, public engagement more generally on this point. I don't know whether has anybody got any details of specific engagement we've done with the trade. If not, I can send that to you. I'll circulate that around the committee. But working with the trade on, I suppose, environmental issues is something that we're very keen to do. So the idling is only one part of it, but as members who've been on the committee for a while will know, the council also took the decision to subsidise the fees for low emission and no emission vehicles. And at the moment, basically the fees for low emission vehicles, I think, are 50% the full fee.
50%
hybrids, yeah, for hybrids, and 100%. There's 100% remittance of the fees for no emission vehicles. But the take up at that moment is fairly low. So we've had one new electric private hire vehicle and two new hybrid private hire vehicles come on, and one electric and one hybrid private hire renewal. So I mean, hopefully the whole issue of emissions is changing as we move to more hybrid or completely no emission vehicles, and we'll continue to encourage the trade with those incentives.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I'm referring to Appendix A. I noticed the largest number of licenses appears in the personal license section. Apologies if this was commented on earlier. And I noticed that has been a trend that's increased fairly gradually year on year for the last 5 years. Do we expect that increase to continue? And to what extent does that contribute to those licenses contribute to our income?
Just looking at this, I suspect the reason why it's increasing year on year, and I'm looking at my colleagues, is that is a cumulative figure. So So it's interesting that the point you raise is an interesting one, because everything else is about the actual number of licenses that have been issued in that year. And for personal licenses, we appear to have a cumulative figure. I think we would need to look at the way we present that going forward. But you're quite right. I mean, it does go up steadily. Each year, around about 60, 70 new licenses a year, 50 to 70, looking at the range that's on there. And that has been fairly steady by the looks of it over the years. And I assume that continues to be steady. I'm looking at my colleagues in the applications team.
Yeah, I would imagine that would continue. So personal license originally was done for 10 years. However, they've taken that out now. So they're now lifelong licenses, but it tends to be for people that are taking on a designated premises supervisor role in a premises license. So it tends to be the new people coming into the trade as opposed to something that gets renewed.
Okay, thank you.
Right, sorry, Councillor Vickers again.
Sorry, I was just wondering what dermal, personal and premises registration is. Is that not nail bars or something, is it? Dermal means skin. What's dermal, personal and premises registration? I don't know.
I think by and large what we're talking about is skin piercing. Amanda, do you want to just give if that's okay, Chair?
It's electrolysis, skin ear piercing, tattooing and acupuncture. So dermal processes.
Members, have we now exhausted the question at all? Because I think if we have, we need to look at the proposals that we really need to consider. Firstly, we need to note the content of the report, including the work of the licensing committee and service relating to activities for this 22-23 period. We also need to note the funding gap and the work that's being done to mitigate the loss of income. We also need to note the progress that's been made with assisting the trade in going greener, and then also any other additional initiatives that we need to explore to help the taxi trade to go greener. So I don't know whether members wish to actually vote on them independently, or whether you want to vote for them on block, or you want to make any observations on these particular notes, because clearly that's what we've got to consider within the report. So members, I'm really looking to you to firstly consider the licensing committee on 2.1. So do I have a proposal, Councillor Drummond?
Are we going to go on block on this or not?
Well, if it's your wish, I'm prepared to accept it. I think officers would be prepared to accept
I'm
it.
quite happy to propose we go on block, Chairman.
You'll second it, Councillor Kanda. All those in favour? Okay, thank you very much. We then move on to item 6, and I, by the way, just for members' information, I did actually ask my colleague to my left-hand side, was there anybody on Zoom, which was joining, especially members of the trade, and I've been informed that there isn't any. So, because obviously we would give them the opportunity to speak via a suspension of standing orders if it was their wish, but in this case, if there's nobody there, then obviously we don't need to involve them. So I'm turning to you, Moira, to obviously introduce the Hackney carriage tariff for 2023 update.
Thank you, Chairman. The purpose of this item is to report back to the Licensing Committee on the outcome of the consultation we have undertaken on the changes to the Hackney carriage fares for 2023. This is an executive function, and therefore they have already made the decisions needed in order for the changes to be implemented. The new fares did come into operation on the 19th of June. The procedure for setting fares and public notice requirements are set out in Section 65 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976. It's a very prescriptive process. It requires a decision to vary the table of fares to be made. We then need to go out to consultation. The consultation needs to last for a minimum of 14 days. It prescribes exactly where we need to place the notices, etc. And then if objections are received, then it also determines how the matters are dealt with after that. The executive agreed at the March meeting that we should undertake a consultation on the changes, and that consultation ran from the 11th to the 25th of May. They also agreed at that meeting that we would come back here and report back to this committee on what was said. The notices were placed in both the Newbury Weekly News and the Reading Chronicle. They were advertised at Market Street Reception. They were sent to the community panel, also placed on the website, and letters were sent directly to the trade as well. The council received 7 objections to the proposed modifications and 14 more general comments on them. It's all set out in the appendix to the report. We also received unusually 11 comments which were in support of the modifications, and those didn't all come from the trade, surprisingly enough. More detailed information about the outcome is set out in Appendix A to the report. In essence, the proposal was to increase the fares by around 8.5%. That meant that a 2-mile journey went from £8 to £8.60 in total, if it was during tariff 1 time period. Because we received objections, we had to take a report back to the executive for a decision. The executive noted the objections but agreed to implement the variations that were proposed by the trade. They have, however, asked us to look at going forward, that we look at the filing charges again. My colleagues and I, again, will be happy to take any questions that you have about the tariffs.
Members, thank you, Maura. Members, questions? Councillor.
Yes, well, I was thinking, not particularly to do with the fees, but I did raise an issue with you a while ago about the service to people with disabilities, taxi service. And you said you were looking into doing, I think you said, a mystery shopper exercise, just to see whether there was, whether the taxis out there were offering a service to those with disabilities. This was to do to an individual who came and said that she'd had problems as a disabled person getting transport in a taxi. And I wondered whether there was any more information there, or whether this is an issue that's been raised by other people. Are there any, do taxis have to be able to take a disabled person, or only specific taxis? Do they all have to sort of have a facility for taking a wheelchair in the back and helping a disabled person, or can they just say no?
Well, you need to speak to me.
If I may, Chair, I may need to bring in one of my colleagues. I mean, where we are in terms of the Hackney carriage fleet, the taxi fleet in West Berkshire, there are a number of original taxis that basically are saloon cars. But beyond that original grouping of taxis, they have to be disabled. They have to be capable of basically taking a wheelchair, somebody in a wheelchair. Which means that we've got a fair number of those on the fleet. In terms of the law around that, my understanding is that legally they are obliged, basically if they are able to, and it is, I think, an offence to refuse to. And that was a change that came in some time ago, wasn't it? Last year. Was it last year? Chair, do you mind if I bring in my colleague in?
Yeah,
Thank
sorry,
you.
please do, Sean.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think that came under the Equalities Act. It was amended. Oh, sorry. There was a changes to the Equalities Act, which obviously made the provision for disabled persons to be able to be treated the same. So was it last year, Vicky? I think that was further ones last year. It was 2010, but then there was amendments. So yeah, we've got mixed fleets within West Berkshire.
Chair, I didn't quite catch the end of that, but I'm also aware that we have to publish a list of vehicles that are disabled, have disabled access in West Berkshire, and publish that on our website as well. So to say what is available in the district, but there are a fair number of vehicles that are either custom made or have been adapted basically to accommodate wheelchair users. Going back to the question about mystery shopping, I don't know whether that has been done yet. I think probably not, but it is something that's on the agenda, and we will report back to the committee with the results of that in due course. Okay.
I think Councillor Vickers raises quite an interesting point, because the concerns that I've had as a member over the years is sometimes the vehicles have been deemed to be disabled friendly, but of course, as we all know, some of the wheelchairs come in various forms and shapes and sizes, and I think we did know two particular local individuals that regularly used disabled vehicles, but because their wheelchairs were adapted in some special way that extended, it was very difficult to accommodate them. And I think that's probably an issue that will probably need to be considered too.
Yeah, Chairman. I mean, obviously, I think that's something that obviously we can pick up in the process of the policy work that we're doing. The other thing it's probably worth saying is as well is that drivers are required to do training in respect of pardon, the carriage of disabled passengers. So that is part of their licence conditions as well. But it's a very good point that you make about the varying sizes of wheelchairs and everything else. They're always welcome to contact us about what vehicles are available on the fleet and who operates those vehicles.
Is that out on literature that disabled people might receive, or support groups that they must, that this is a service the council can provide them with?
There is a list on our website of designated wheelchair accessible vehicles for anyone to access. Just looking, it does need an update actually, which I can do this week, so that's not a problem, but it is on our website.
The point you make about basically whether people know it's there is an interesting one, though. So I think actually maybe that is something that we can basically build into our kind of communication plan going forward, because as you know, the service puts out quite a lot of communication and tailor it very specifically to groups that support.
I'm just thinking that the hospital has a patient information point, and they have hundreds of leaflets. There's almost, but I would have thought that's a good place, to actually make sure that things are displayed. They like us to. In fact, I've just delivered some leaflets about the patient information point to the reception today, so that people coming in know that there is such a thing. But equally we can advertise in the hospital, to make sure that we're passing on that's useful information.
Sure. Chair, I think the point you make is a really good point. I mean, we'll pick that up with the community engagement lead that we have within the service, and we'll add that to the things that we'll kind of prioritise to do to get that information out, because there's no point, as you say, having information available to people if they don't know it's there. So we will pick that up, Councillor Vickers, and make sure that we progress that.
Right. Okay. Yes, if you so wish to come in, if there's nobody else that wishes to ask a question, Councillor Vickers.
Just looking down the list here from your response to your consultation, and there's quite several comments about the cost of what's referred to as fouling, which seems to be a big problem for taxi drivers. And quite frankly, if I was a taxi driver, I'd give up if I had a few incidences of this, because it sounds pretty horrible to have to deal with such things. But they're basically saying that they think the cost to the cleaning and the loss of use, they think the cost should be increased. Is this something that we are considering, or do we have control over that? We don't just leave it up to the taxi service themselves.
I'm going to call the officers in a minute, Councillor Vickers, but I mean, I think it's an issue which concerns a large number of not only the taxi drivers but also members as well, because I think members feel quite strongly that we should be respecting some of these taxi drivers and their vehicles. And when a taxi unfortunately has had some unfortunate substance of whatever it might be in the vehicle, it's difficult to clean, and also smell involved and the loss of income. And I think this has been reported, I think, in the last week or two or three instances where taxi drivers have been out of circulation for a day or two. So I think in future, the figure that you've seen quoted is likely to be really considered as on an upward trend. What the final outcome will be, that's obviously to be determination. But I'm going to bring in Sean or Myra.
So, I mean, it's interesting because obviously the loss of earnings is one of the key issues with this. So one of the models that we're actually looking at is whether effectively the fouling charge is linked to the fare banding. So obviously, because after, say, at tariff 2, so that at night, effectively, basically taxis cost more. So if they're off the road, then they lose more. So one of the options we're looking at is to link basically the fouling charge, the internal and the external fouling charge to the fare banding to reflect basically the potential loss of income from that. But this is something we will be going out to consultation on again. I don't know what Moira.
So Chairman, this is something that's been discussed at length at this committee. There were proposals to set a higher fouling charge, but the committee, when they looked at this matter in January, decided that they would stick at the rates that were on the consultation. But as Sean has said, that what we're looking at is potentially, because there's a ratio between the flag charge tariff 1, tariff 2 is 1.5 times the flag charge, and then the tariff 3 flag charge is double that. So we were looking at proposing potentially having a filing charge that is also proportional. Not only, as Sean says, that they tend to earn more money later in the evening, it also becomes more difficult to get your car cleaned, because during the daytime, the various cleaning services will be in operation. In places like London, they have sort of suites where the taxi drivers can get to. Doesn't matter what time of the day it is, and clean them. Whereas in West Berkshire, you're unlikely to be able to get your car cleaned later in the evening, and more than the clean, they also have to then dry. So we would certainly be looking at bringing back that proposal when we look at the next lot of tariffs in 2024.
I'm just looking.
Is that a continuation of the
No,
same
no, it
subject?
was another one actually.
Okay.
If you finish.
Carry on.
Yeah, there's a comment. I'm just trying to understand where it talks about EV vehicles and wanting a Hackney carriage plate first, 50 cars. I'm just trying to understand that little paragraph. It's on page 82, WBC PH driver. Seems to be saying that there should be a higher charge and something in favour of electric vehicles. And then it refers to, I'm not quite sure I understand that paragraph. Page 82, under the objections.
Just wait for Moira to find the relevant paragraph, Councillor Vickers.
First one.
I'm not entirely sure, Chair, that I understand the comment or the. But as I think we've already said, we do try to promote the use of EVs by providing a reduction, and in the case of electric vehicles which are 100% electric, as opposed to hybrid, a complete basically rebate of the fee for the first, I think it's first 2 years. I was thinking that. First 3 years. So you get 3 years without a fee if you switch to an electric vehicle.
So it's as if this person
maybe wasn't aware.
So that's really the relationship.
Pardon?
And if you remember correctly, Councillor Vickers, it was one of the initiatives to try and obviously encourage the trade to start considering going down that route. And you heard in the introduction from Sean that we've now got 2 or 3 taxis in that category, and hopefully that will increase in the future.
They are expensive.
I think that, sorry, Chair, I think there is a bit of a nuance to the point they're making, which is to do with the protected plates, the original plates we talked about with the council, but I'm not sure the full detail of it.
Okay, Councillor Foot.
Thank you very much, Chair. Could I ask through you, Sean, obviously, if we're looking to the future, I mean, we're hoping we're going to get more and more electric vehicles. And we've already said that we got a problem with revenue coming in, with license applications perhaps falling. If we're going to waive fees, how have you any ideas how you can address that? Thanks.
Chairman, just to say that they're not waived, they subsidise. So there is a pool of money being set aside to pick up on those fares. But the reason we brought that comment here is that we have agreed that we would look at it every year to see if that system needs to stay in place, because there could come a point, obviously, at which all the vehicles, in an ideal world, all the vehicles were electric, in which case we would, not be making any money. The council would be subsidising the fleet. So that statement is in place for 3 years, but we need to review it each year. So we're reporting to you at the moment that we've got 5 cars on the fleet. There are a couple of other ones that we know that are out there. They just haven't, because the licenses are done on a rolling basis. They just haven't renewed their licenses yet, but it's not a significant proportion of the licenses as yet.
Okay, any further questions at all on this particular report? Okay.
Chair, can I just add to the point that Councillor Foot's just made? Because it is a good point, because obviously, eventually, hopefully, one day, everything will be, the vehicles, the whole fleet will have moved to an electric fleet, including we will have to charge fees. I think basically the decision around this was part of the council's wider environmental basically drive, and it was all about really setting example and everything else, and obviously, but as Moira has said, we will need to look at that, and at the point where we reach that kind of towards that tipping point, then obviously basically we will need to adjust. As Moira said, the fee is still there, but we will need to have a look at the whole issue of rebate in due course.
And of course, as you well know, Councillor Foot, consideration is being given regarding charging points as we speak. So that is obviously a very important point that will have to be addressed. Moira.
Just to say also, we work closely with the environment delivery team on this, so I've reported the figures back to them today. And one of the things that they are doing is they're going to be doing a case study on one of the drivers who's agreed to speak with them, who has more than one vehicle that they can access. So they have the data about whether or not whether an electric vehicle is worthwhile, because obviously at certain points, depending on the cost of fuel or the cost of electricity, there are tipping points. But this scheme is only in place for 3 years, but subject to annual review, so that it could be lengthened or shortened as needed.
Members, well, this report, we were just basically asked to note the outcome of this statutory consultation, and we also were asked to note about the objections that and the various tables that we received over this period up to the 8th of June. So I think we just move on, Moira, correct? Okay, so item 7 is obviously an update on the National Register of Taxi Licence revocation, refusals and suspensions. And again, I think you're going to introduce it, Moira, correct?
Yes, Chairman, just to say that this item is just for information. There's no need for a vote at the end of it. The National Register of Taxi Licence Refusals, Revocations and Suspensions Register, or commonly known as the NR3S, is a database of information about times when a licensing authority has refused, suspended, chosen not to renew or revoked a taxi or private hire driver's licence, based wholly or in part on information about the driver in relation to safeguarding or road safety. The NR3S has been developed to improve public safety and confidence in the taxi trade. There have been numerous high-profile cases where drivers who have been refused licenses in one area have then gone on and got a license in another area and just failed to disclose their past history. This undermines public safety and damages confidence in the licensing regime and the trade. Reputable drivers and firms have welcomed the initiative as it will provide a mechanism for ensuring that information about refusals and revocations is shared between all licensing authorities in a safe and secure way, removing the potential loophole that they have discovered. The report is for information only and sets out the procedures that will be followed by the Council when requesting or disclosing information associated with the register. I'm sure you're all tired of hearing my voice now, so I'm going to leave it open to questions.
Moira, any questions on that explanation, members? Sorry, did I see your hand, Councillor Taylor? No, okay. We're just asked, as Moira said, just to note the report, but it's your opportunity to make any points or raise questions if the case might be. Seeing no hands going up, I think we just note it and we move on, Moira. And we then move on to item 8, which is a forward plan. Is there any specific points you want to raise, Moira, Sean, in relationship to it, or does members wish to make any observations at all? Moira, Sean, any points to raise?
Chairman, we had the launch of the Community Alcohol Partnership on Thursday, and it was really lovely to have Councillor Foote and yourself and Councillor Drummond passed by as well. We've decided that if it's okay with the Chairman, that we would bring a report back to the November meeting just to provide an update on what's on the progress that's been made, and perhaps just to make members more aware of the scheme.
I think, Moira, we must welcome that opportunity to attend that launch, and I think it will be an opportunity to for members to hear a lot more about it in the near future. So, sorry, it was a question on this. On
The Community
plan.
Alcohol Partnership, which I'm afraid I
Yeah,
didn't go to the
yeah.
launch. Is there anything we need to know about that? I mean, is that a partnership with the licensees out there? Is it about pub safe? That's the type of issue, is it?
So, Chairman, it's a partnership that works. So it's around education, a lot of education kind of things. We work with Thames Valley Police and local licensed establishments and things like that. But we have got some literature that we can forward to the members of this committee, if that will be helpful.
I was going to say, any other points at all from you to raise? Okay. We're obviously talking about forward plan, but comments have been made in relationship to this particular committee on the day it sits, and obviously the time it starts to commence the meeting. Has any member got any observations on that at all? For or against the time of the meeting?
Well, us that are here probably are the ones that probably don't have a problem. It's the people that aren't here probably that need asking.
Well, I mean, for obviously new members, it was set roughly at 16:30 on the strength that several of the members of this committee sat on town councils, especially Newbury and Thatcham, and also other members from the rural wards attended their respective parish meetings, and it gave them opportunity to go back and attend the parish and town council meetings. So if you're happy with 16:30 start, we will continue on, but it was your opportunity to make observations if you so felt that it need to be reconsidered. Councillor Foote.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, speaking personally, I think that is great benefit actually, because as you pointed out to me in a personal chat, Chair, it does give you a chance to then go on to subsequent meetings. And, you know, as a new councillor, I had no idea of the importance of this committee and what it does. And so I think a 4:30 start for me is ideal. I don't know about other members of the committee. Thanks.
And most of the meetings I've attended, they've been roughly about 1.5 hours possibly slightly longer. Tonight it looks as if it's a reasonably short one. Perhaps other times you'll probably be questioning officers a lot more once you've got to absorb some of the information that's been submitted to yourselves. But you know, I think it's sort of completing proceedings round about 1800 or just after, that gives adequate time to obviously get back to parishes which probably start at 1900, 1930 start time. So yes, if the nods around the table suggest that we continue on, and perhaps I just allow the final word for Councillor Jeffrey, because I'm just about to close the meeting, Councillor Jeffrey, but I will give you the opportunity just to make a comment that I was just making to other members, and that is that this meeting starts normally at 16:30 on strength. It gives members the opportunity to go back to their parishes or town councils and continue in their other role, link within the town or the parish, or even if they're a member. And I presume with that, as a Thatcham member, you probably feel the same, do you?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. But where I was actually the meeting of down at Padworth for the waste people.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, several of us wished to attend that and we weren't able to. So perhaps that'll be that will be held another time. I think Councillor Vickers made that comment in an email recently, didn't you? Yeah, let's hope so. Okay. Any other points do we need to raise at all? Okay. Well, thanks very much, officers, for your contribution, and thank you very much, members, for attending. And next time it's when is the next meeting? November the 7th, is it the official? I think it is, isn't it? Something like that. It's definitely November time.
6th of November, guys.
6th of November. And possibly, of course, there could be some subcommittee meetings in the meantime if we get called to consider a licensing application. So thanks very much for your attendance.